Here we are in the game in the top right-hand corner. Who do we have?
We have, from Team Quantic, it is the StC, former Terran OGS player, now one of the star players for Quantic, constantly underrated, even dating back to the beta. Everyone was really excited for him, but then he had his military service, and then had to drop off the radar for a little bit, but has since come back with a vengeance. And in the bottom right, we have from Team Axiom, the founding member of Axiom, along with Total Biscuit and Jenna Bain, also known as Intricacy. It is CranK. Now, CranK used to be on Team Slayers. He was a Protoss player that was kind of up and coming. I know I was talking about him with several players. Like I know I was talking with him to Zeris from Team Light. And, Zeris was thinking about trying to talk to CranK, maybe see if he can approach him for, like some pick him up or whatnot.
Yeah.
Or, I think maybe it wasn't even that far. It was just talking about the general skill level of CranK. And we were both very impressed. And we're like, man, this is really good. And then CranK was doing well at GSTL, getting some nice kills for his team. It just overall looked like he was a solid addition. He even came out as an ace one time for Slayers. And then we always knew that CranK had potential, but it was awesome to see him perform well in some tournaments nowadays.
That it is. It's been really cool, especially, of course, that his breakout performance at MLG, he was just, he had such a fantastic run, managed to, be awarded a breakout player and everything. So, I mean, he's really been giving some great showings since really the day he hit the fields in foreign tournaments. So we'll see if he can take the series here against the STC and avoid being knocked down into the loser's bracket. Guys, currently, the STC is leading 1-0, and we're going to see if the somewhat Protoss favored Entombed Valley can work out here for CranK.
Oh, really? You think Entombed Valley is favored for Protoss?
I really, really like force fields. So if you manage to be like on the aggressive side and try to hit timings when your opponent takes their third, you can really split them up pretty well. Now, Terran Army does fare okay with splitting. I mean, it's actually, it doesn't hurt them too bad if you're looking at just like the effectiveness of the army itself. When you're talking about quantity, there's, you have a unit count, you cut it in half. It's a little bit tough to deal with splash damage and such like that, and I can't tell you how many times, Dan, I've seen a lot of units on these ramps, and suddenly Protoss splash is just paying itself off at ridiculous quantities.
Oh, all right, that's fair enough. I mean,
why don't you?
Generally speaking, other than the very early game where Terran's actually in danger of a 4-gate, I feel like Terran is really strong on a map like Entombed Valley. It's a map where it's really tough to kind of break positions, especially since there's not many flank opportunities. And Terran fights more effectively in a ball unless Storm is on the field. And even then, you can kind of have really nice concaves you can set up and turtle on 3-4 bases. It's very tough for Protoss to kind of swing in without taking lots of damage over the cavern with Vikings too. Like there's nice little airspace and air pockets where Colossus can get picked off.
I do agree with that. I'm not the biggest fan. It's Daybreak in this map. I feel like Colossi just for some reason always get murdered by Vikings without doing any damage.
Yeah, I've seen moments like that. I've seen... Ooh, we'll hold that thought. We have a little skirmish here at the top of the ramp for Terran. StC getting a little bit bold and takes a lot of damage on his Marines, but so did CranK. Wow, CranK making it drawing it down to the last possible hit as... Well, CranK has a pretty good idea of what his opponent's doing. He's just going to go for a 1-gate Nexus, but now he's adding on 2 more gates. Will he go for a Robo or just simply add more gates? There it is.
Well, there is the Robo. And, a little bit interesting here because, of course, we're talking about... All right, you got Protoss early game. You mentioned how, it's pretty strong on this map. And yet CranK, I really thought, if that was being the case... I expected CranK to maybe, go for a strong timing attack here. Now, that's definitely still a possibility. He's only on 2 bases right now, and has yet to even drop down any additional gas. So we'll be keeping an eye on what units he's making. And he's making Stalkers right now, so things definitely could shape up into something of that nature here. But it's, it's probably going to be that or a really quick third, so we'll have to wait and see.
I mean, historically, what has been the hardest maps to hold off like a straight-up gateway attack, right? Tal'Darim Altar, where you have just an incredibly wide natural, Xel'Naga Caverns, Metalopolis, even Scrap Station, right? That's why it was so darn effective, really, to a certain extent. Like, even when Terran's on 1 base trying to move out for his expansion, that ramp is just so wide. And Entombed Valley has that similar feel, because look at the natural. If you scroll a little bit left, Kibbles, you can just see how big of a concave you can set up towards the left side onto a defending position. you can hug even the bottom of the ramp a little bit too. But oh, CranK doesn't have any opportunity to maybe react. His Stalker does get picked off. One Immortal's on the way. CranK has to also kind of scramble here because he's not in position. Realistically, StC should not be able to do too much damage, and he does back off. Good call, as he saw the probe that wanted to take an expansion at the third base, which is normally a good move. You can take quick 3 bases on Entomb Valley. It's just a little bit hard to pull off sometimes if you don't know that your opponent's playing greedy either.
And that's, I mean, that's so great out of the StC. Putting that bunker down, not only does it delay the expansion, but it lets him know that CranK fully intended to go for one. So we are going to see the fast third here, and I mean, I like this. I am a little, you know, I'm a little bit shocked that we're seeing such a fast tech to Robo, because with the fast third, with the fast Colossus, he could actually just die to a timing attack here out of the StC. You know, you mentioned that it's got a defender's advantage, but Immortals and Sentries don't put out a lot of damage at all, really. So if oh god, the StC's moving out right now too, and Colossus are not even close to hitting the field.
Well, if CranK, well, okay, CranK is going for his Nexus. If he sees this coming, he makes sure he can't get dropped, and he can get good force fields off. He can hold this off easily. If he gets a Guardian Shield up, CranK has to pay attention to Stim, though. Oh, good defensive force fields, not to let too many units up, and now that's a big wasted Stim for StC. Excellent reaction time out of CranK.
Yeah, it was. He's going to try to move these units around the side, maybe to snipe. Does pick off the Stalker that was on the low ground scouting for CranK, and the StC is going to be waiting for these medevacs, which should be arriving momentarily. Oh, I thought he saw the Observer there for a second. Here are the medevacs now on the field, and it looks like, did he only actually get one? No, okay. No, so the second one just is somewhere else.
It's a little behind. It's all right.
He's a lagger. What's up?
No, yeah, well.
Lagging behind.
It's just lagging a little bit, but you know, you just having those medevacs come out, it just again empowers this composition so much to be in multiple places at once, especially since CranK has 2 points he needs to pay attention to. Now, Entomb Valley is a little bit convenient because if you defend your third and your natural, then you have, well, your main's pretty safe, assuming you can protect both fronts. So StC has a little bit tough scenario coming in, but now there's a Colossus onto the field. Just have to get pretty decent force fields, and he's able to lock everything down, but not necessarily the best ones. I mean, the Colossus can kind of work onto units, but the spread of the Terran army is still pretty significant, and CranK is losing several sentries, but overall, CranK does clean everything up. Could have lost a little bit less. It doesn't matter, though, because he's on 3 base compared to 2. Still pretty well done. I think CranK lost the first Immortal and the second Immortal almost, pretty much.
Yeah, I really liked that out of CranK. I mean, one of the difficulties, you mentioned it perfectly, that Colossus was firing on like a single Marine and then another single Marauder. It was like shooting these units that were all by themselves, but oh, extended Thermal Lances is still 12 seconds from being done. Could this possibly be sniped fast enough? No, he's going to go for the mineral line instead, in fact, and now he starts targeting, but it's going to finish. There, it's done.
Going to finish, so yep. That's huge, but he's also a big attack at the third base. CranK wants to defend that front. And, you know, we were saying, hypothetically, you should be safe against any drop in the main, but CranK was constantly getting pressured at the third base and drawing his attention away from it. Also, you know, StC is just putting on non-stop pressure. This is where Protoss is most afraid, but once he gets enough Colossus out, once he stabilizes, CranK is going to be really hard to kill, considering that StC, he hasn't been making Vikings. He doesn't necessarily have a direct way to confront his army, and if CranK does this thing where, I mean, if he just counter pushes after he cleans up all of the drops in bio, there's nothing really that StC can do to hold it off. He needs to start making Vikings now.
No, in fact, that's one of the reasons we're seeing StC continue this drop harass, because he needs to keep cranking his base and buy time. You're absolutely right, Frodan, and we've got these 4 medevacs with now so few units left in them. It might be CranK's time to just say, you know what, I can hold this with future warpins. I'm moving out.
Well, CranK is going for also a charge upgrade, which is really great in this scenario because, again, charge just pushes the bio back. They can't really split and go towards the Colossus like they would try to split against like a lack of Vikings. It's really tough for them because, so as a result, they're kiting, they're stimming, they're taking more damage, and the Colossus can pretty much get that strong initial front-loaded damage. Meanwhile, CranK is, instead of pushing, he's just going to go for the safer route. Feels like he's very far ahead, so he's going to get his Templar Archives and Forges, meaning he feels very safe. And honestly, he should feel safe if he can catch these medevacs that StC is relentlessly dropping.
We'll see. He's got 2 Stalkers in position. The units are already landing. Probe, first casualty falling, and the Stalker as well. Now we're going to see if CranK can manage to... Yeah, he's going to push these back actually pretty quickly. Doesn't seem to have too much of a problem with it, but you can see immediately, Dan, the medevacs are rallied to a different position.
Over at the third, there's another drop too from StC, and this is starting to get a little bit annoying for CranK, but once he starts getting Templars onto the field, he can go for feedbacks. It's going to reduce the ability for the bios to do too much without stim. But look at this here from StC, going to target out one of the forges. That's a nice win. Now, it was only +1/+1, and StC already finished his initial upgrades. He's working on 2/2, so that's going to buy StC valuable time. Still, overall, though, I feel like CranK is not in the worst position possible.
Yeah.
StC is starting to catch up in macro, though. Those mills are really kicking in, and he's starting to work on his 4th base. This is how you come back as a Terran player. He's done a great job. StC is playing brilliantly.
You know, you mentioned, though, that CranK, he's not at all out of it or anything, and I actually... after we were watching MMA versus Squirtle yesterday, and had a discussion with Grubby about the game because MMA tapped out really early, and he had 2/2 upgrades. Squirtle only had he had +1, but Squirtle had Colossus and he had Templar tech, and we didn't see it really much at all out of MMA. And actually, Grubby's opinion, you know, he was like, "Look, Protoss Splash is just so good. I think Protoss beats out an upgraded Terran army if the Terran doesn't have tech to match it." So you know what? We may see the realization of that if Storm will get started up here momentarily. We'll have to keep an eye on it. For now, though, it's just going to be a full-scale engagement between these two. And actually, the Ghost Academy's on the way, so things developing. But the Colossus taking huge hits right now. Where's the anti-air for CranK? It is non-existent. There are about 6 Stalkers on the ground and 2 Colossus cleaned up immediately, Dan.
Two Colossus just like that, immediately wiped off to the field. 5 Colossus is so much more intimidating than just 3. In fact, ones will get picked off again. StC is playing this positionally beautiful, and it's very tough for CranK to do anything. Look at this. He's trying not to kite too far forward, or not move too far forward, but the Vikings are kiting very well. And StC has picked the perfect time to strike. Not a good concave at all for Protoss. He has to go all the way on the right side. The Vikings able to focus on everything. CranK is in danger of dropping to the loser's bracket. The Vikings are landing. And StC coming back.
Gonna go down.
Very well done by StC. He advances to winner's bracket round number 5. And, you know, regardless of what happened, CranK was ahead with 3 bases, but that is how you use aggression. CranK not able to defend all the fronts, and it's really tough because you stretch yourself thin when you go for Colossus. Colossus is not mobile. You know, StC took advantage of the greatest weakness of that army: Sentry, Immortals, Zealot without charge, and Colossus. All of those move at a 225 speed or slower. So being able to be mobile, stimming, picking off tech structures, delaying further Colossus, I gotta say it was really well done.
It's a fantastic point, actually. Like, if you're, we were talking about mobility and, you know, the advantages that you can have with Protoss if you go for a mobile composition, but we just didn't see it out there out of CranK. And actually, I know you mentioned how you're like, I hate this map for Colossus, actually, because they just get sniped off, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even in the danger zones too. Normally, by the 4th base, Vikings can kind of park, or, you know, I mean, it's a little bit tough for the cliffs because, like you saw, StC found a really nice sweet spot right between the ramps of the natural and the 3rd, where Zealots can't get in there. And he says, well, you don't actually have that many Stalkers. Your Colossus count is getting dwindled, and if I pick off enough, I mean, CranK started off that fight about half strength in terms of Colossus, and that's his main form of AoE. We've seen a lot of Protosses say after 3 Colossus, maybe that's good enough, and then go straight into Storm, because if he's at an upgrade deficit, Storm ignores upgrades. You know, when you get an armor upgrade on Terran, you're taking out 2 damage per swipe from a Colossus, which can be pretty huge.
Yeah. It's massive, and well, the Colossus didn't even really get any damage in that game.
It's 4, right? Because it hits twice.
Double time attack, yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's a significant amount, man.
All right, guys. That was a crazy game, crazy set overall. StC going to prevail over his opponent, and we will see him moving on forward into the round 5 of the winners bracket. CranK going to be knocked down into the lower, and we'll see what happens with him from there.
That's right, guys. We're also going to find out what match we have next. This is Stream 3 with Frodan.
I'm Kibbles. Thank you very much. We'll be right back.
The new AMD A-Series APUs give you discrete level graphics and multi-core CPU power, all on one